Hello, and welcome to this video, where I'm explaining everything you need to know about my world, which you can see right there. When you enter a campaign in my world, you're actually only entering a very tiny sliver of it. The scale of my world is absolutely massive. There are dozens of settings I've already created within it, and there are dozens and dozens of more waiting to be created. The first thing to understand is how the campaign you're a part of fits into the greater world. And to do that, we need to understand how magic works. There are three societal shaping magics. There is the divine, the arcane, and the druidic. Or in other words, magic that clerics use, magic that wizards use, and magic that druids use. This is a high magic world, and each of these magics empower people to shape their societies. Each of these magics is going to influence how a society looks. So for example, one of my settings, which I'm running right now, is called Actios, and it is a divine society. In fact, it is the divine society. The worship of the gods allows the people of Actios to create things on incredible scales. Clerics are able to provide food en masse, and a civilization can flourish. All this stuff gives Actios an ancient feel. In my world, it is an ancient Greek analog, but that's just one tiny part. Actios will forever hold this static image of this ancient Greek interpretation of divinity. But around 1,000 years after the campaign I'm currently running, a naval empire emerges that is purely arcane. As they reach the heights of what arcane magic can do for them, they end up looking much more like Victorian-era Britain, while being just as powerful as Actios in their relevant field of magic. So when we think of advanced cultures, a civilization could have a deeper understanding of the world that they live in than we do in our own world, but also look like an ancient culture in our world. So in this world, you may be able to see an ancient Greek soldier, a Victorian-era British naval soldier, a Viking, and a Renaissance-era looking person. I don't know what you would call that. And they would all be from the same time. So typically when we think of D&D worlds, we think of races each having their own slice of the world cut out for them. This is not the case here. I try to include as many of the races in published D&D material, as well as dozens upon dozens of homebrew races. And it is very rare that you'll find a culture that is based off of one race's interpretation of the world. Even when you find cultures that have high frequencies of one race, and they might even be referred to as the Elven culture or the Dwarvish culture in that region of the world, the culture won't be based off of the idea that they are an elf or a dwarf. It'll just be a culture that a lot of elves happen to be a part of. And when it comes to races in this world, not all races exist everywhere. Some settings have limitations, and each race in any given setting, or a specific part of the world, is going to have an ethnicity that makes them unique to that part of the world. So goblins are green over here in Estenos, but they're red over here in Manothan. They don't exist at all in Folia. Orcs are purple here. They have skin as dark as the night sky here. And over here, there aren't any orcs. And when it comes to races, you should also let go of any ideas you have about how they're typically characterized. Characterizations of a person in this setting are from their culture, and in some cases there are loose connections between race and culture, but there is no consistent characterization to any race across the grand scale of the world. The dominant orcish culture in this place is a culture that worships a life deity. They are as good and as morally upstanding as you can get, but also that culture is not exclusive to orcs in that setting. In this setting, there aren't any racial ties between cultures. So much time has passed in that place since cultures first began to develop, that anything that might have been unique to a specific region with a race in it has been completely lost to time because of how big the world is. I don't know where I'm going to put this in, probably when I'm talking about the races and stuff. There's no homophobia or sexism, transphobia in this world. Again, with all the different races and all the different kinds of people, A, it just doesn't make sense, and B, it's not fun for a lot of people. There are imperialist and colonial empires, but there isn't any elves hate dwarves, dwarves hating orcs. Orcs are evil and dark elves are evil as well. There's none of that. Now, when it comes to gods in my world were all once more or less mortal beings. There was a time before divinity, and then mortals began ascending into the outer planes, creating their own domains. Ascensions happen 9 at a time and are typically hundreds of years apart. There is a long history in my world. There are some gods that belong in the domain of others. For example, there is a goddess of death who is among the first to ascend. And since then, there have been many gods that have ascended into that domain. Some gods even ascend into a domain of a domain. And so this is what I would call a pantheon in my world. There are many pantheons. I think there are around 30 prime deities. And any god that falls within a prime deity's pantheon is much less powerful. But at the same time, gods are infinite and abstract. They don't manifest onto the material plane. They are not reachable or killable. You cannot comprehend them with your mortal eyes. When it comes to things like tieflings and Aasimar, each one of these races is going to have a specific interpretation based off of which god they belong to. And there are different presences of tieflings or Aasimar based off of where a god's influence is. So when it comes to a setting, if there is a limited influence of gods, tieflings and Aasimar from that area will also have to look a specific way. The last thing I'm going to talk about is time. The majority of the games I run fall somewhere in between the year 7000 and 9825. These are later eras in my world, and the campaigns that fall within this time period all connect to a couple of larger stories that I hope one day I'll be able to tell with a series of actual play shows. It is a vast world, dozens of campaigns set in it, many of which share settings. I look forward to seeing how players will shape events and make impacts on the settings they're a part of that will be seen across many future campaigns. I hope this was informative. I hope you have a better sense of my world and will have an easier time making characters in it. Anyway, I think that's the end of the video.